Hey, what is going on, you glizzy goblin guzzlord? So today we're going over all the fully revealed set of Ruler of the Black Flame, which will be coming out in Japan soon. I believe it might even be next weekend. This should be coming out over in Japan, Ruler of the Black Flame. All the cards have been fully revealed. We should be getting most, if not all of these cards in our upcoming set, Obsidian Flames. And speaking of Obsidian Flames, a sealed product is now available for pre-order over at fullgripgames.com. So if you're looking to pick up any sealed product for Obsidian Flames, they'll be coming out August 11th. Check it out, fullgripgames.com. Of course, a link will be in the description as always. And we should be getting most of these cards in Obsidian Flames. Maybe not all of them, but the time frame is pretty close. So I assume we'll be getting pretty much everything from the Ruler of the Black Flame in Obsidian Flames. And the first card we're taking a look at here is this Trevenant, 140 HP, Stage 1, 4 Spirit ability. As long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, put 1 damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon during Pokemon Checkup. Now, Pokemon Checkup might be new for some of you, but Pokemon Checkup is just in between turns. The only use case I could see for this would be playing it in a deck where after your active Pokemon gets knocked out, you push up the Trevenant, your opponent takes a damage counter, so you get to build up like a little bit of extra damage in play between turns as your opponent takes KOs. Cards like this have been played in the past for this kind of effect. It's a stage 1, it's a little bit costly to set up. You're only doing 1 damage counter in between turns. If it was like 2 or even 3, that'd be a better argument for that. And its retreat cost is 3. So moving it is going to basically require you to also have a switch card to move it. So that 1 damage counter better be pretty impactful for you to play this. But that's the one use case scenario where I could see people including the Trevenant in some decks. The next card I want to talk about, just kind of, I don't think this card is going to be good or played at all, but from like a design standpoint, this is just like one kind of blows my mind. So we got this Ninetales here, 120 HP. It's a stage 1. The first attack is a fire energy for 20. The second attack is fire, and then put 9 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon, which like for a stage 1, costing 2 fire energy is not very good. But then on top of that, during your next turn, this Pokemon can't attack. This Pokemon's going to get knocked out. It won't be able to attack next turn. Like, why is this? Like, if it somehow survives the turn, why would we want to limit this card from being able to attack again? This just like blows my mind that this was on this card. Because putting 9 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon isn't that good to begin with on a stage 1 that costs 2 fire energy. And then if somehow the 120 HP Pokemon survives in the current day and age of Pokemon, you can't attack with it next turn. Like, this thing is already going to get KO'd. It just like, I read that and I was like, this just feels off. Like, it feels bad. I don't know. SQEX, of course, is bad. SQEX, 210 HP. It's got the Terra attribute, of course. Water. Scalding block, 160. Discard an energy from this Pokemon. Defending one can't attack during your opponent's next turn. I don't see this being very good. We have had attacks like this in the past be decent, where you kind of limit your opponent's active Pokemon's ability to do things through attacks, shutting down, picking a certain attack and stopping your opponent from using it, stuff like that. The Ralts in Gardevoir's current memory skip Ralts in Gardevoir right now is a great example of that, where Vulpix V-Star is kind of annoying for Gardevoir to deal with, but if you KO all the other stuff on their bench and then kind of leave them with just a Vulpix in the active, you can then memory skip the active Vulpix, and then they can't attack with it, and they don't have any other Pokemon set up on their bench, so they kind of just lose the game. So, but on a EX, 210 HP, doing 160 damage, I don't know, I just don't feel where this would ever fit in a deck, especially in a certain matchup. It could have its moment in the future, whenever there's like a deck that maybe is like a really big Pokemon, and it's the only Pokemon you set up. It's like we have one Pokemon in the active, you don't play a ton of switch cards, get hit him with that Scalding Block. But yeah, I don't think the Ice QX is going to be any good. The Seismic Tote is actually super cool. I think it's going to be a cool meme deck for sure. 170 HP on stage 2 Seismic. Quaking Area. As long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks cost colorless more. So that's really annoying ability to have to deal with. It is on a stage 2, so I think this is definitely going to fall under the category of meme deck. For 2 water energy, you do 120, then during your next turn, you do 100 more damage. So you do 220 on the next turn with the Echoed Voice. But if your opponent bosses around you, or escape ropes, or you switch to the bench, or go to active, whatever, you won't be doing that extra damage. So not going to be a great deck. It could be a little bit of a meme deck. You play Crushing Hammers in here, right? Remove some of your opponent's energy. You get the turn 2 Quaking Area. They're struggling to attack, and you kind of can start to go from there, because the attack is pretty efficient as well. 2 water energy is not too hard to get to. So I thought it was just a cool card. Could make a cool meme deck at some point in the future. The Tyranitar EX, I've been saying this a lot about these stage 2 EXs, and I'm going to say it again. 340 HP is a lot of HP. Got the Terra attribute, of course. It's got that Mountain Crumble attack. Pretty efficient attack for energy cost wise, but resource wise, it's not that efficient. So 1 energy to do 120 damage is pretty efficient, but the cost is you have to discard the top 2 cards of your deck. So not quite as efficient as it appears, but something to do in the early games. Turn 2 Candy T-Tar, do 120, not bad. And then we got that Toll Rampage Fighting, 150 plus 100 more damage if any of your bench Pokemon have damage counters. So getting the damage on your own bench Pokemon shouldn't be too difficult. 250 damage for 2 for energy, also a pretty efficient attack. I don't know, I kind of like the T-Tar. There might be something here. Nothing really stands out and kind of blows me away. No broken ability or seemingly broken attack, but just a really solid, efficient attack. And once the stats get high enough on anything, whether it be HP numbers or efficiency of attack numbers or just damage, the card's going to be good, and maybe T-Tar gets to that point. It's hard to tell right now. Definitely have to play with the card once it actually releases. Got a Thunderous here. Now, the Thunderous could be cool for Miraidon decks. Got 110 HP. Got that bad weather ability. As long as Pokemon is in your active spot, prevent all damage done to your bench Pokemon by your opponent's attacks. So the one situation that this could come up where this would actually be pretty good is up against like Lost Box. You put Thunderous in your active early game, so they can't just snipe your Mareeps and your Flaffies off your bench. But the attack doesn't line up too well as a great attacker into the Lost Box matchup, to be honest, because for 2 lightning energy, you do 140 damage. This Pokemon does 90 damage to itself. So you're going to have 20 HP left. Then they can just attack you with Sableye. They KO the Thunderous. They KO a Flaffy, whatever it might be. You could stop Greninja early from chasing your Mareeps and your Flaffies, I guess. But the attack isn't too efficient into Lost Boxes. You damage yourself so heavily. Also only have 110 HP, so you're going to get knocked out by a Cramorant anyway. So I'm not sure about the ability is cool for the Lost Box matchup, but the rest of it doesn't really flow. The one reason this could be cool in Miraidon decks, though, is because Miraidon decks have been severely lacking a good one prize Pokemon. It's like really hurts the potential prize trade for Miraidon, because most of the time your only attackers are 2 prizes, which means your opponent gets the ability to kind of just go the 2-2-2 prize route, and you never get to put them on odd prize cards. And because you never get to put them on odd prize cards, you never get a longer game potentially. And sometimes you're in situations where you just have to awkwardly 2-hit KOing a Pokemon anyways, but with 2 prize Pokemon yourself, so you just fall behind in the prize exchange for that reason. People have been playing the Zeraora, and the Zeraora is cool, so it's not a free retreat cost, but the extra damage from something like the 140 from the Thunderous could be cool as well. The ability doesn't really line up too well into any situations in the current meta, but maybe this is like that one prize Pokemon that that Miraidon decks have been looking for. Probably not, but we can hope. Belly Bolt, non-EX one here. We looked at the EX a little while ago. So that 140 HP, it's got that Insulator ability. Prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks of your opponent's Lightning Pokemon. So we have something similar like this in the format for Fire Pokemon. Is it Fido? Is that the Pokemon? The dog that is also made out of bread. That Pokemon can't be damaged by Fire Pokemon. And the Belly Bolt can't be damaged by Lightning Pokemon. And then it's got Lightning Colorless, 100 damage to the attacks. Damage isn't affected by any effects on your opponent's active Pokemon. So these cards are always kind of interesting, because if you eventually ever come up with a deck in a scenario in a certain meta where it's like, I can beat everything with this deck, but I can't beat this one Lightning deck or this one Fire deck. All of a sudden you could be like, well, what if I just ran like a 2-2 Fido or a 1-1 Fido or a 1-1 Belly Bolt, and then you just beat that type of deck? That's all of a sudden like a solution for the deck that you're trying to make work's problem, potentially. So yeah, make sure you remember that this card exists when you're doing some deck building in future metas. We got the Cleffa. This is a super powerful card. I think this will see a ton of play. 30 HP, obviously not great, and obviously with Lost Box running around, it's not great, but you probably wouldn't mind setting it up in other matchups because it's got an insanely good attack for 0 energy costs, grasping draw until you have 7 cards in your hand. So imagine you just go first, or second, I should say. You go second, play out your turn, play out your hand, retreat to Cleffa. You have like a 2-card hand, draw 5 cards. Now, of course, your opponent could Iono you on your next turn, but then you're only going down by -1 card. Still seeing like 5 new cards or 6 new cards overall. That is a lot of extra cards to see on your turn. And then if you don't get judged or something like that, and you start your turn with 7 cards, that's like a bunch of new cards for you to work with at the beginning of your turn. So yeah, the Cleffa, I think, is going to be a super popular card to be played in a lot of decks. It's also a 1-prize Pokemon, so you're not really setting up a huge liability like a Squawkabilly or leaving Illuminion in play to be taken advantage of later on. If your opponent's going to be knocking out your active Pokemon no matter what it is, it may as well be a 1-prize Pokemon that helped you set up. So Cleffa, I think, is going to be a hugely played card in the game, if not immediately. Maybe once we devolve more to Stage 2 EX type, or evolve to more Stage 2 EX type decks and get away from like Lost Box and stuff eventually, then Cleffa will be played a ton. But yeah, super powerful card. Also, it's free retreat cost. So if your opponent doesn't KO your Cleffa next turn, you can just pivot it into whatever you want to and just go from there. So insanely powerful card. I expect it to be played a ton, if not immediately, eventually. Togekiss got an interesting ability. Not going to be great, I don't think. It is a Stage 2, and that is why. It's got that Precious Gift ability once in your turn after your attack. So you do have to attack to trigger this ability. So if you attack, after your attack, you may draw until you have 8 cards in your hand. So a lot of potential value, but with a lot of decks playing a lot of heavy counts of Iono and Judge and all that stuff, even if you draw those 8 cards after your attack, if you just get Iono next turn, I mean, you never got a chance to interact with those cards, so it doesn't really matter. And you have to set up a Stage 2 to even get to that point. So I don't think the Togekiss is going to be good at all. Yeah, I just don't see it. Maybe, but yeah, I don't see it. Another card with an interesting ability that I don't think we'll see a ton of play, just because it's going to eat up a lot of your bench space. I don't think a lot of decks can support the Lunatone. It's got the Lunatone here with the New Moon ability. If you have any Soul Rock in play, prevent all effects of your opponent's stadium cards done to your Pokemon. So one thing you can think about immediately, this would be, oh, if you put like a 1 of Lunatone, 1 of Soul Rock, and Mew, then Pat doesn't shut down your Genesect, but then you only have, you know, 3 Genesect or 2 Genesect on your bench or whatever. It eats up too much bench space. A Lunatone Soul Rock thing eats up way too much bench space. I don't think this will ever really work in any deck. The deck would have to be like already playing with like a really open bench. I don't even know what deck could actually support this, but I mean, it's possible at some point in the future we do see this work. But for the current meta, I can't think of a deck that would actually have the bench space to support benching a Soul Rock and a Lunatone. That's like a lot to put on your bench right there. I don't think any deck can handle that. The Vespa Queen EX, this is a cool one. It's one of the new EXs that haven't gone over yet. It's got the Terra attribute, recovery of pheromones, heal 6 damage from one of your Pokemon for 1 grass. Not very good, but for triple grass, we got that Phantom Queen attack, 200 damage, put 3 damage counters on each of your opponent's bench Pokemon that has any damage counters on them. So we got Hawlucha to set up some damage counters on the bench Pokemon. We've got Alakazam to move damage around to be able to put damage in certain places where you want to take advantage of it as well. So we got a couple different ways. You can play stuff like the Bog, or there's that, whatever the stadium is called. I forget what the stadium is called, but whenever your opponent attaches an energy from their hand to a Pokemon that's not psychic, they take 2 damage counters. We got that as well in the format. I believe the Old Cemetery. So we got a couple different ways to build up some damage and play on your opponent's Pokemon, move it around with Alakazam, get it onto their bench Pokemon, and then be able to actually put those 3 damage counters on each of your opponent's bench Pokemon, and then doing 200 damage to the active. That's getting a lot of damage in play. Utilizing it all is going to be the question. How are we going to utilize all that damage to actually take KOs? Of course, doing 200 damage, we're basically 2 KO in anything in the format, but we probably want to be a little bit more aggressive than that. We're taking like 3 prize, 4 prize turns through this attack. So we'll be able to get there. I'm not sure, but I'm hoping it is because it's a really cool attack. The energy cost is also a problem. 3 grass energy. I don't know. Gardenia is a possibility, but that supporter sucks. We could also use Fortress EX, but then we're giving our opponent 2 prize cards. I don't know. A couple different things that have to be tested out with this card. Also, eventually we do get that flip a coin, attach an energy from your discard pile card to a Pokemon in the 151 set. So we don't have that quite yet, but maybe that combos pretty well with this deck, and you don't have to like give your opponent 2 prize cards off of Fortress to set up. I'm hoping there's a different way to set this thing up besides Fortress, but Fortress is looking like the #1 way to go with this right now, and I don't love the idea of giving my opponent 2 prize cards. I don't know how you guys feel about giving your opponent prize cards, but I'm generally not a fan. Glamora EX, I've taken a look at this before. I think it'd be a cool, kind of like the Trevenant I talked about at the beginning of the video. It's got that Dust Field ability. As long as Pokemon's in your active spot, your opponent can't have more than 3 bench Pokemon. If they have 4 or more bench Pokemon, they discard bench Pokemon until they have 3 remaining. So like your opponent knocks out your active, you send up Glamora, they discard bench Pokemon, or like turn 2, you send up Glamora, they discard their bench Pokemon, you switch into a different attack. I don't think we're attacking with the Glamora. It does take 2 fighting to attack for the poisonous gem. 140 your opponent's active is now poison, but I don't think that's doing enough right now in the current meta. I think we need to be attacking with something else and just kind of using this as like a disruption Pokemon that we set up, push it to the active, and then we switch into our real attacker and kind of go from there. Overall, doesn't seem great, but that's probably how I would try and utilize it. Charizard EX is going to be a big one, probably the biggest card coming out of this set, and I think it will definitely create an archetype around it, or there definitely will be an archetype created around it. It's got the Terra attribute, of course. We've got that Infernal Control. When you play this card from your hand to evolve a Pokemon during your turn, you may search your deck for up to 3 basic fire energy cards and attach them to your Pokemon any way you like, then shuffle your deck. So not only is it a Pokemon with 330 HP that accelerates fire energy into play wherever you want, it also has a really good attack as well for fire. Fire 180 plus 30 more for each prize card your opponent has taken. So we're looking at capping out. If they've drawn 4 prize cards, we're doing 300 damage. We're doing 330 if they're taking 5 prize cards. Basically 1 KO in everything in the format. I definitely think there's some room for Charizard to flourish once it releases. Like I said, there's a ton of fire attackers in the current format, but it hasn't quite felt like they have what they need yet. But you get the Charizard EX involved. Fire acceleration ability, like I said, accelerating the fire engine to play through the ability, has a good attack on it. Definitely some potential here for this Charizard. That's going to be the #1 card that I'm looking for to come out of this set, I think, for sure. I think that is definitely the one. We don't look at that. We'll take a look at his Malamar real fast. Another control-ish card. Got the ability Psy Vision. Once in your turn, you may use this ability. Look at the top card of your opponent's deck, then look at the top card of your deck. So, in some kind of control type deck, you know, you have your opponent hand-locked effectively through whatever means. Take a look at the top card of your opponent's deck. You see what they got coming up. You can either maybe disrupt that card by discarding it or shuffling your opponent's deck or something else. I don't even know. And then you have, like, you know, some more information to work with. Once you kind of have your opponent's board state locked, you then have control, hopefully control of their top deck. I don't know what you'd play to gain full control of their top deck, but there might be something out there. Mawile with the Special Eater ability. When you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, you may discard a special energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. Solid ability. I don't really think that it fits super well in the current meta. It'd be like okay against Mew or something like that, but yeah, not a huge fan. Revavroom EX. I'm not going to talk too much about this. I did like a whole video on Revavroom EX, so if you're interested in that, go check out the Revavroom video on the YouTube channel, here on the YouTube channel. Yeah, go check that out, because I did like a whole video talking about Revavroom EX, and I'm really excited for Revavroom EX. I don't think it's going to be like a new broken deck or anything, but it's going to be a ton of fun. That is for sure. Got this Altaria here with an interesting attack. It's got the Sleepy Song for 110 for Water Metal. Your opponent's active is now asleep. During Pokemon checkup, your opponent flips 2 coins instead of 1. If either of them is tails, the Pokemon is still asleep. So some kind of like, not quite like a lock type deck you could make with this, but you know, if you're going up against these big V and EX Pokemon, you can just kind of keep them sleep locked until you knock them out. You could even try and come up with ways to knock out your opponent's Pokemon that involve them getting KO'd on your turn, like using Alakazam and Hawlucha and all that stuff. So you like build up a bunch of damage in play, and then you leave them with like 10 HP left going into your turn. You use Alakazam, you move 1 damage counter over, knock it out, and then you attack with Altaria into the next Pokemon or something like that. So definitely could see some kind of sleep lock type deck from Altaria, because yeah, flipping 2 coins, most of the time you're gonna get around 1 heads, 1 tails. So you know, you're gonna stay asleep for a while. If you can get the KOs, as long as you're getting the KOs without actually knocking out your opponent's Pokemon going into their turn, then you can like keep them locked potentially infinitely until you win the game at least. Pidgeot EX, 280 HP. Quick search during your turn. You may search your deck for any card and put it into your hand. Pretty powerful ability, but it is a stage 2, and we're not seeing that many decks right now that have rare candies in them besides Guardy. I don't think you have bench space for something like this in Guard 4. There's just better cards to be playing. But I think as we progress a little bit more towards rare candy based stage 2 EX based decks, this will find its way as like a 101 or a 111 line in a lot of them, because you'll have those extra rare candies to work with, and be able to search your deck for any 1 card during each turn once you finally set this thing up is pretty powerful. Of course, games are shorter now than they were back when we had the old Pidgeot, but I think there's still some potential value to get out of this. I think one deck that could play this on release would be the Baxcalibur, Chien-Pao Baxcalibur, because that deck already has kind of some excess rare candies to work with and bench space, to be honest. That deck doesn't always have like a solidified set of Pokemon you're trying to set up. You probably wouldn't play this and B-Barrel, but this instead of B-Barrel could be the play. So we could see this finding its way into Chien-Pao Baxcalibur decks immediately. Maybe some kind of just Arceus builds, like Arceus plus Pidgeot could be a deck as well. Not too sure about that, but Chien-Pao is like the most likely initial home for the card, I think. Flamingo, this card is interesting. Once again, evolve to a little bit more of just kind of stage 2 EX type decks. If one of those decks does have a lot of low HP Pokemon, 60 HP basics, we got this Synchro Feather attack here from this Flamingo, Colorless. If you have any Flamingo on your bench, it's attack to 60 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So theoretically, you could knock out like 2 of their basic Pokemon. Something to just kind of keep an eye on and remember that exists in the format and could potentially take advantage of a little bit later on. We got the Letter of Encouragement item card here. This one is, if one of your Pokemon was knocked out during your last turn, you may play it and search your deck for up to 3 basic energy cards. Reveal them, put them to your hand, of course. This one is interesting. We don't have any real way to consistently find item cards besides Irida, so I could see this being played as like a one-of in Chien-Pao. So that way when your opponent takes their first KO, you can use Chien-Pao's Shivery Chill ability, plus play the Letter of Encouragement and just kind of get all the energy out of your deck really aggressively. That could be okay. Besides that, though, I don't see actually... I don't see where you'd ever play this card. I don't know what you'd ever play this in. But as a one-of in Chien-Pao, it seems decent. For sure, because you have Irida, and that's the biggest thing, is like finding the actual card. We have no way to like find item cards consistently, but you could through Irida. Troll Cap, as long as the Pokemon this card is tattooed is in the active spot, cards in your opponent's deck can't be discarded, or cards in your deck can't be discarded by effects of your opponent's attacks, abilities, item cards, full cards, or supporter cards. So an anti-mill card, I guess. I don't think this was like a weird one when I saw it. So I feel like it's like, I mean, there's no real mill decks in the format, or like even coming out of the cards in this set, but I guess we have an anti-mill tool card now. Sure. Revenge Punch. When the Pokemon this card is attached to is knocked out by damage from an attack, your opponent's Pokemon put 4 damage count. Knocked out by damage from an attack of your opponent's Pokemon, put 4 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. So if your Pokemon gets knocked out by damage from an attack, you put 4 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. This is actually one of those like interesting cards where we could see it get some value when you just have like that matchup where it's like, I'm always just coming up a little bit short on the return KOs. So if you play like the Revenge Punch, you know, you attack, then they attack, knock you out, they take those 4 damage counters, and now you can like one-hit KO them all of a sudden. So it's one of those things where like in certain matchups, this could be pretty powerful. Of course, it's gonna be super matchup based, and you know, will it ever see play? It's possible it doesn't, but it's also possible it does. You got Gita here. Until the end of your turn, when you play this card, none of your Pokemon can attack, including Pokemon you put into play this turn. And then you search your deck for 2 basic energy cards and attach them to one of your Pokemon, then shuffle your deck. So a super powerful effect here, but you're only going to want to be using this mostly in the early game. But we do have Luminion, so finding this card is definitely possible. Finding it pretty consistently is definitely possible. It's definitely one of those cards where you might want to play it in a deck where you just need a little bit extra power in play on that first turn going second. Currently in the meta, I can't think of a deck that would actually want to play this to abuse it, but I'm sure in the future we'll run into some decks that actually want to take advantage of this. As long as we have a card like Luminion in the format, a card like this always has some potential. But if you don't have something like Luminion in the format to be able to find this consistently, because you basically only want to play this as like a one-of to play on your first turn when you go second, basically, for the most part. I can't imagine you playing this in any other deck for any other reason. So, or in any other situation for any other reason. So that's basically the only situation that I feel like would ever come up where you'd want to use this card. So we have to have something like Luminion in the format, which we do. So there is possibility to have that card be good. Or take a look at your opponent's hand, choose one card that you find there, and put it on the bottom of your opponent's deck. Then your opponent may draw one card. So immediately another control type card. Well, that's what it looks like here. But I actually think this card could be pretty powerful just in general in a normal like attacking deck. Like if you played this after you knocked out your opponent's active Pokemon, you could completely cripple their potential on their next turn. You knocked out their current attacker, and then you also looked at their hand and you took away their boss's orders or their research or something like that. But it isn't a draw supporter, so in the early game it's going to be basically useless, and turn to turn for you, you're going to have to make sure you're being able to set up an attack and actually take those KOs while being able to also play something like Ortega without playing a boss's orders or a research or an Iono yourself. So definitely hard to find room for cards like this in decks, but I think if there is a deck out here that can abuse it, it would be a very powerful addition to that deck. Poppy, move 2 energy from one of your Pokemon to another of your Pokemon. I don't see that being very good. Rhyme, draw 3 cards, switch out your opponent's active Pokemon to the bench. So your opponent switches their active to one of their bench Pokemon. It's not like a Gus. This would be like an insanely broken if it was draw 3 cards and effectively boss's orders. But it's draw 3 cards and your opponent switches their active to the bench. And yeah, I don't see a whole ton of use cases for this one either right now. Nothing off the top of my head is coming to me. I don't think it'll be a very good card. It'll maybe be played as like a one-of at some point in some deck for a specific reason in a specific meta. We got that Town Department Store, a card that combos with one of the cards that I'm most excited for from the set, the Reverum EX. Once during each player's turn, that player may search their deck for a tool card, reveal it, and put it into their hand. Then the player shuffles their deck. I also think this is kind of a cool card in general, and we could see it even be played in stuff like Mew VMAX, because Mew VMAX does play. They play Choice Belt, they play Cleansing Glove sometimes, they play Force Seal Stone, so it'll be another out to guarantee your Force Seal Stone, which is great, but it also could find you the Choice Belt or your Cleansing Gloves. You know, just depending on the situation, it becomes like an extra copy of all of those, increasing the consistency of finding any of those cards at any point. So if you're playing a lot of different tool cards, this all of a sudden like a card that you might want to include in that type of deck. Like I said, works really good with Reverum for sure. Could also be cool in some Mew decks. At least that's the deck that comes to mind immediately. That would be probably decent in a Mew deck. And then we've got the Poke League HQ. The attack cost of each basic Pokemon in play. Both goes on your opponents is colorless more. Will this card be the thing that kills Lost Box? Probably not, but it's definitely a cool tool that I'm sure people will be trying to utilize to give themselves an edge against Lost Box. You could even go as far as being like, my deck has a good matchup against everything that's not Lost Box. I'm going to play 4 Pokemon League HQ in my deck to help me in the Lost Box matchup. You could even go that far, but what I think is more likely to happen is you're going to play 1 or 2 of these. Specifically, I'm thinking like Gardevoir. You know, Gardevoir plays one of these down. Iona's the Lost Box player down to 1 or 2. That's pretty tough to get out of, to be honest. It doesn't matter how many Pokestops and Vacuums they play. When Lost Box gets put down to like 2 cards from an Iono while a Pokemon League HQ is in play, that's going to be tough to recover from. So that's where we're probably going to see this card played the most, is in Gardevoir decks as a one-of to just combo with a late game Iono up against Lost Box. And that's it. That's my thoughts on all the cards coming out of the Ruler of the Black Flame. Once again, we should be getting most of these cards in the Obsidian Flame set that we'll be getting in August 11th or on August 11th. I'm not sure when Ruler of the Black Flame comes out, but I think it's next weekend. And if you guys need any Obsidian Flames sealed products, fullgripgames.com has got you covered. Link in the description. Catch y'all in the next video.